don't need to make bad games to destroy a game company. Sometimes a fraudster's fake balance sheet is enough. Sometimes a billion-dollar giant buys you and quietly suffocates you. And sometimes you make the greatest game of your generation but get shut down before you can finish it. These are gaming brands that no longer exist, and this time, the stories hurt a lot more.
It's me. I wish I could talk to you.
Visceral Games. Visceral Games was founded in 1998 as EA Redwood Shores and spent years as an unremarkable studio making film tie-in games. Then, Dead Space came out in 2008 and everything changed. Dead Space was unlike anything at the time. Survival horror in space, a UI-less design philosophy, the weight of Isaac Clarke's every footstep. The game was both a critical and commercial success, and the studio took the name Visceral Games in 2009. Dead Space 2 was even stronger, but for Dead Space 3, EA forced in microtransactions and pushed co-op, and sales came in below expectations. It later came out that EA had expected 5 million copies from that game. Visceral never found that creative freedom again. EA handed them Battlefield Hardline, a game built to compete with Call of Duty, completely at odds with Visceral's DNA. Then came a Star Wars project led by Uncharted director Amy Hennig, codenamed Ragtag. It sounded extraordinary. But in 2017, EA said single-player story-driven games don't make enough money anymore and shut the studio down. 80 people lost their jobs. That Star Wars game never came out. The irony? A few years later, EA made a Dead Space remake with Motive Studios, and Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order, a single-player story-driven game, sold millions. When they closed Visceral, they were standing right on the edge of being very, very wrong. If you don't want this channel to end up in the graveyard too, make sure to hit that like and subscribe button. Now, let's get back to the video. LucasArts. Everyone who knows LucasArts remembers something different. Some remember Monkey Island, some remember X-Wing, some remember Grim Fandango. When George Lucas founded the studio in 1982, the goal was simple: bring the Star Wars universe into gaming. But LucasArts became so much more than that. The golden era came in the 90s. They developed a game engine called SCUMM, and that engine made an entire legendary series of adventure games possible. Maniac Mansion, The Secret of Monkey Island, Day of the Tentacle, Full Throttle, Grim Fandango. These titles still appear on Best Adventure Games Ever lists today. On the Star Wars side, X-Wing, TIE Fighter, Dark Forces, and the Jedi Knight series built a universe unlike anything else. And then, in 2003, came Knights of the Old Republic, a masterpiece that still sits at the top of greatest RPGs ever made lists, offering a depth in the Star Wars universe that no film ever could. Tim Schafer and Ron Gilbert came out of LucasArts. They're still making games today. In the early 2000s, the studio gradually turned inward. Projects got canceled, management changed. In 2012, Disney acquired Lucasfilm for $4 billion. And 154 days later, yes, 154 days, they shut down LucasArts. 150 employees lost their jobs. A game called Star Wars 1313, a Boba Fett title with breathtaking visuals, was canceled along with it. Disney's justification was minimizing risk. Some of the games that carried that risk were the most beloved moments in gaming history. Sierra Entertainment. Sierra's story began in 1979 at a kitchen table. A couple named Ken and Roberta Williams started a small company in California, originally called Online Systems. One day, Roberta sat down with a text adventure game her husband had brought home and had a realization. Why aren't these games visual? That question didn't just change her career, it invented the graphic adventure genre. The golden era began in 1984 with King's Quest and lasted well into the mid-90s. King's Quest, Space Quest, Police Quest, Gabriel Knight, Leisure Suit Larry. Sierra was the heart and soul of PC gaming during that period. But it wasn't just games. They built an entire ecosystem of talented writers, designers, and iconic figures like Al Lowe. And here's something most people don't know. The original Half-Life was published by Sierra. Then, in 1996, the company was acquired by a holding group called CUC International, and from that moment,
everything changed. CUC got caught in a massive fraud scandal. The company changed hands. The founders left. In 1999 came what employees called Chainsaw Monday. Management shut down all the original studios and laid off 250 people in a single day. Then came Vivendi. Then Activision. Sierra officially closed in 2008. That mountain logo and that wind sound effect were perhaps the most nostalgic images in PC gaming history. Now they only live in archives. Westwood Studios, Las Vegas, 1985. Two young men named Brett Sperry and Louis Castle, aged 20 and 21, rented a garage and started Westwood Associates. Their early work was porting other companies' games to different platforms, a humble beginning. Then, in 1992, Dune 2 came out, and they invented the real-time strategy genre. The golden era fully exploded in 1995 with Command & Conquer, GDI, or Brotherhood of Nod. That choice lived in the mind of every PC gamer of that era. Red Alert came in 1996 and raised the bar further. Alternate history, the Soviets, Einstein. Westwood wasn't just making strategy games, they were building a cinematic universe. The entire C&C series eventually sold over 30 million copies, earning a Guinness World Record. Electronic Arts acquired them in 1998. Things were fine at first. Tiberian's Sun and Red Alert 2 were still strong games, but EA began expecting every release to be a massive hit. Renegade and Earth and Beyond didn't meet those expectations. In 2003, EA shut Westwood down and relocated the team to EA Los Angeles. Some of them left and founded Petroglyph Games. They still make strategy games today, but the Westwood name was gone. The Command & Conquer series eventually ended as a mobile game under EA's watch. Sperry and Castle received the Industry Icon Award at the Game Awards in 2015. Late justice, but justice nonetheless. Bizarre Creations. This Liverpool studio was originally called Raising Hell Software when it started. The publisher, Sega, didn't like the name, so the studio went unnamed for a while. In 1994, they settled on Bizarre Creations, and it suited them perfectly. The golden era came with the Project Gotham Racing series. Developed exclusively for Xbox, it was a genuine rival to Gran Turismo at the time. The Kudos system, where you were rewarded for driving with style rather than just driving fast, created a feeling unlike anything else. Geometry Wars started as a hidden minigame inside PGR2 before becoming its own phenomenon. The studio was a team that knew exactly what it wanted to make in both racing and arcade genres. Activision acquired them in 2007. In 2010, Blur came out. Real cars with arcade racing mechanics, a genuinely good game that got buried under Red Dead Redemption and the other giants of that year. Sales fell way short of expectations. In 2011, Activision looked for a buyer for the studio, found none, and locked the doors. 200 people lost their jobs. Before closing, the studio released a quiet farewell video. Brief, understated, dignified. The Project Gotham Racing rights stayed with Microsoft, but the series never returned. Prototype footage of a Blur sequel leaked years later. It looked incredible. It never came out. Neversoft. Even people who don't know Neversoft know that logo, an eyeball impaled on a spike. It appeared at the start of every Tony Hawk game, and the moment you saw it, you knew exactly what was coming. Pure fun. Founded in California in 1994, Neversoft was a small studio until Activision came to them with a question. Can you make a skateboarding game? The result was Tony Hawk's Pro Skater, released in 1999, and it became a cultural phenomenon. The soundtrack, the mechanics, the parks. Neversoft hadn't just made a game, they had recorded a memory for an entire generation. They made 9 Tony Hawk games, each one building on the last. Then Activision acquired the Guitar Hero franchise and handed it to Neversoft. Guitar Hero 3, 4, 5. The studio was trying to manage both Tony Hawk and Guitar Hero simultaneously. Both slowly faded. In 2010, the Guitar Hero series was shelved entirely. In 2014, Activision merged Neversoft into Call of Duty developer Infinity Ward. In their final days, the studio founders ceremonially burned that iconic eye logo. Literally. The founders retired, the name faded into history. That loading screen sound from Tony Hawk's Pro Skater still gives me chills. Pandemic Studios. Pandemic's founding is almost an escape story. Josh Resnick and Andrew Goldman left Activision in 1998 to start their own studio. Activision even made a small investment in them. They hadn't yet realized they were funding a future competitor. The golden era came between 2004 and 2005. Star Wars Battlefront was one of the biggest games of that year, selling millions of copies. Mercenaries, Playground of Destruction, Destroy All Humans, Full Spectrum Warrior, Pandemic quickly became one of those rare studios capable of making games that were both fun and genuinely original. In 2005, a joint structure was formed with BioWare, and Bono joined as one of the investors. Growth was accelerating. In 2007, EA acquired both Pandemic and BioWare for $800 million. For Pandemic, this was the beginning of the end. EA's expectations weren't met. Mercenaries 2 disappointed. In 2009, EA laid off 1,500 people. Pandemic was swept up in that wave. 228 employees lost their jobs weeks before Thanksgiving. Their final game, The Saboteur, shipped while the studio no longer existed. 4 former employees made a video inspired by the movie Office Space after the closure. They were smashing a printer in the parking lot. Telltale Games. Telltale Games was, ironically, born from a closure. In 2004, LucasArts shut down its adventure game department, and 3 employees affected by that decision, Kevin Bruner, Dan Connors, and Troy Molander, walked out and started their own company. They wanted to prove that adventure games weren't dead. The early years were hard. They kept themselves alive with niche but loyal licensed properties like Sam & Max and Wallace & Gromit. Then, in 2012, The Walking Dead arrived, and everything changed. It was one of the best-written game stories anyone had ever seen. Clementine and Lee, the episodic format, the decisions that broke your heart every single episode.
You have to shoot me, honey.
It swept nearly every Game of the Year award that year. 28 million episodes sold. Then, in 2013, came The Wolf Among Us, adapted from the Fables comic series, following Detective Bigby Wolf through a noir fairy tale world. It was the game that proved Telltale wasn't just lucky, they were genuinely great storytellers. Telltale was no longer indie, they were the industry's new star. Then, the company started chasing that success by taking every license available. Game of Thrones, Batman, Guardians of the Galaxy, Minecraft, Stranger Things, Borderlands. A team of 100 grew to 400 by 2018, but the games got weaker. Episodes came late. Investors pulled out. In September 2018, the CEO called all staff into a meeting. They were given 30 minutes to collect their things and leave the building. No severance. 225 people lost their jobs that day. One employee later said, "It felt like a scene straight out of The Walking Dead." Telltale couldn't even finish the final season of the game that made them famous.